Keith, I'm really sorry you weren't able to join us the other night, but the reason I wanted to do this interview with you on your own, as it were, is I think there's some important things that you've got to say about the process of people meeting with others, the other, and the way in which those encounters should be organised. Now, Keith, you're a Métis from Canada, and you've said some things to me in the past which have really stuck with me, and I'm hoping you're going to say some of those again today. But I wanted to start by asking you, maybe actually just introduce yourself and say what you do in Canada.
Sure. Well, greetings. Keith Henry. I'm a Métis person. I'm the president and CEO of the Indigenous Tourism Association of Canada. And I'm joining you today here in Vancouver, which is on the west coast in Canada, in a beautiful traditional territory of the Squamish, the Musqueam, and the Tsleil-Waututh First Nation people. So it's a real honor to be on the show with you, or be interviewing with you again today, Harold.
One of the things that intrigues me is that I often say Africa is the most culturally diverse continent, in the world, and it probably still is, but that's in part because we've lost much of the cultural diversity of the North American continent, which in many ways, if you look at the tribal map of North America as it was a couple of hundred years ago, it's extraordinary diversity of people.
It absolutely is. You know, a lot of the indigenous people in North America call North America Turtle Island, if you will, or one massive piece of rock. And but it's really culturally diverse. You know, in Canada alone, there's over 630 First Nation communities. There's a number of Métis people across the country that live in urban and rural and remote locations, and there's Inuit people in the far north. So we are linguistically very diverse. We're culturally very diverse, and we're not homogenous in any way, shape, or form. And I think that actually is what brings a real richness to who we are as a people.
And sadly, there hasn't been that much contact with Africa historically, or indeed in the current period. And I really wanted to create an opportunity for you to talk about diversity as you see it. Why do you think diversity is so important in the modern world, Keith?
Well, I think if we all step back for a moment and we think, what are the memories that sit with us? And as an Indigenous person, I can say, in Canada we have a beautiful country. We have beautiful rivers, beautiful mountains, beautiful lakes, beautiful plains areas, landscapes. But anyone that visits Canada will always remember us for one key thing: the people. And why do they remember the people? Because they see us differently, and hopefully they saw different Indigenous people. Hopefully they saw some of the traditions, the regalia, the song, the dance. It's the people that help us, bring us memories of place and name. And that's, for Indigenous people, that's so important. I might be Métis from Saskatchewan, but the Coast Salish, the First Nation on the coast, their culture is around place and name, and the stories of growing up in those lands. And I think that diversity should be embraced. That helps us, make us excited to visit the world. That's why I love Indigenous tourism. It gives another reason why Canada is not only a great destination for Banff and some of the large Niagara Falls and the beautiful iconic destinations, but it's the people. It's the original history and stories of the land. And I think that's what I think the world has become more aware of as we go.
Yeah, I guess globalization has tended to give us a lot in common, and we perhaps need to struggle to maintain those different cultural traditions and heritage and the stories and so on, if we're to have a diversity to celebrate.
100%. I couldn't agree more, Harold. We see it as an advantage. I mean, the world is becoming very homogenous. I'll give you a simple example. Starbucks was a very U.S. branded coffee shop. Now it's in every corner of Canada. So people from the U.S. come here, they see a Starbucks. So what's different about going 100 kilometers away from where they were in the U.S.? What we want them to do, and I know that's a very simplistic example, and it's nothing against Starbucks or anything like that, but my point is, the world is becoming smaller and smaller. And I think the time to maintain your culture and your diversity and help people understand who you are and where you come from in your history is a really important part of telling your story, especially if you're involved in tourism.
Keith, one of the things that you and I have talked about before, but I just wanted to raise it with you again, the whole question of who do these cultures, these amazingly diverse cultures, belong to. And I wonder if there aren't, if from my point of view at least, and put me right, as I'm sure you will, there's kind of two aspects to this, isn't there? There's the question of cultures are presumably living things. They have to continue to evolve. But there's also a question of who should explain those cultures. Who do they belong to, in the sense that they have the right to interpret those cultures and to explain them to others?
Well, I think Indigenous people in our case own our culture. You know, it's our place with our elders and our communities that decide how we want to share our culture, what's appropriate to share, what are some of the things we want to keep sacred and not to share. And having that kind of planning process that we've done in Canada has been really important. We've created things like guidelines on what is the best practices, and the variety of Indigenous communities in Canada have come up with a lot of safe and supportive ways. The challenge we've got today in front of us is that we continue to have to evolve because we're not stuck in the past. Our culture evolves, right? What was contemporary 100 years ago is now considered historic, but yet now it's 100 years later. And what we see today will evolve even that much more so. So I think the community owns it. The community defines how we do that, and understanding the people are the community. Not necessarily always a geographic region. That might be the case in some of, parts of Africa and South Africa, but for Canada, sometimes community is family kinship networks, and those families decide how they want to share their culture. And as we build businesses up through Indigenous tourism, we provide that safe way of messaging. What can we share? We don't want to share all of our ceremonial stories and all the songs and the regalia and everything. But our industry has come so far, and it's been so supported because we've been so sensitive to those kind of principles. And I think those are very critical for the future. Non-Indigenous tourism cannot own that here in Canada. That's up to our Indigenous people to do that.
So when a tour operator comes along to you, Keith, and says we'd like you to put together a performance for us to come and bring a group of British, let's take British tourists to come along and see that, and thank you very much, but our guide will introduce the group and tell people about the culture. How do you respond to that?
Well, we would thank them for that thought, and we would say, if you want to work with us, we need to make sure that we do it in a way that makes sense. You tell us what you need, give us the time and place, and we can decide how. So we wouldn't want a non-Indigenous interpreter telling our story. We would want our Indigenous person telling that story and introducing. And so there's the odd time you might find where a community is comfortable in the scenario you gave, but for more often than not in Canada, we live by the saying, and I've said it before in many presentations, it's not about us without us. Bottom line is, if you want us to work with us, we're not a petting zoo. We're not a token gesture. We want to have a meaningful engagement, and to do that, we need to own that. And so, work with us. Give us appropriate time. Don't rush us. Don't bring out a tour bus and leave in 15 minutes. Create a package that makes sense. So to the operators, I would say, if you're going to create a package, don't. I know there's a commercial interest, but at the end of the day, make it a meaningful experience. Otherwise, it will never work.
Yeah, it's really interesting because each time you and I talk about this, we come back to those two core responsible tourism principles of meaningful connections and traveling with respect. And in a way, we've put those things in different ways. And I love your if it's about us, it better be with us, is a great way of putting that. But essentially, you're saying the same thing, aren't you? That it is a matter of a meaningful connection. And it seems to me that the modern traveler is moving in that direction. They want that kind of experience. And anything less than that is selling them short.
I couldn't agree more. We're seeing it more and more in Canada, where there was so much, especially where I am in Vancouver, our office here. Tourism is a very big driver in the local economy for everyone, not just Indigenous businesses. But operators here, receptives and local tour operators, have realized that, oh, we can't just bring people up, see a quick performance and take off. We got to spend some time, maybe have a bit of a workshop with an artist as part of it, and just spend the appropriate time. Like we've helped work with many tour operators to create the right package. Like, we know you want to sell, we know the industry is interested, but then treat it with the time and respect you need to make it a meaningful experience.
Yeah, and that's the only way you create real value, both for the tourist and for the operator, and certainly for the community. I think we just need to see going forward much more focus on the cultural and the financial value, and a fair share in that financial return going to the different people involved.
And that's the irony of it all. I see a lot of tour operators think, oh, we can't do it, it's too complicated, but they don't realize that if you do it right, the financial rewards are better. Like it's a win-win if you do it right, but rushing it and trying to dictate the terms with community, it'll never work. You may get a couple of small starts and stops, but it'll never sustain. And the reason is because you got to make it, I use the simple phrase, and I know it's always up to interpretation, but it's about meaningful experience. Like, don't rush it, spend the right time, create the right package before you run out and start marketing it.
So we need to remember from what you said, Keith, that if it's not with us, if it's about us, it must be with us.
Yeah, it's not, it can't be about us without us. I absolutely live by that saying, and we've seen it so effective in Canada.
Keith, thanks for your time tonight. That puts it beautifully. Thank you very much indeed.